Africa, a continent pulsating with life, brimming with potential. From the bustling markets filled with vibrant colors and sounds to the serene landscapes that stretch as far as the eye can see, Africa is a land of contrasts and beauty. Its wildlife roams freely, embodying the spirit of the continent. From the fertile Nile Valley, where ancient civilizations once thrived, to the vast savannas teeming with diverse wildlife, Africa possesses an abundance of natural resources. These lands have nurtured countless generations, providing sustenance and a foundation for growth. It is a land rich in minerals, oil, diamonds, and fertile land. The wealth beneath its soil has the potential to transform lives and economies. Mining operations and oil drilling sites are a testament to the untapped potential that lies within. But beyond its natural wealth, its people are its greatest asset, young, vibrant, and brimming with entrepreneurial spirit. Across the continent, young innovators are creating solutions to local and global challenges, driving progress and change. For centuries, African societies thrived, built on trade, innovation, and a deep connection to their land. Ancient trade routes crisscrossed the continent, facilitating the exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures. Traditional villages stand as a testament to the rich heritage and resilience of its people. The narrative of Africa's economic struggles often overshadows its immense potential. Modern cities rise, bustling with activity and ambition, while marketplaces buzz with traders and entrepreneurs. The energy and drive of its youth are shaping a new future. Yet to understand the present, we must delve into the past, to a time when the course of Africa's economic trajectory was fundamentally altered. Colonial exploitation left deep scars, but the resilience and strength of its people have always shone through. By acknowledging this history, we can better appreciate the journey and the promise of what lies ahead. The arrival of European colonialism in the 19th century marked a turning point. European ships laden with explorers, traders, and soldiers docked on African shores, forever altering the continent's trajectory. Colonial powers, driven by profit and power, carved up the continent. At conferences like the Berlin Conference of 1884–85, European leaders drew arbitrary borders, often with little regard for the ethnic, cultural, and linguistic landscapes of Africa. They redrew borders, disregarding existing social structures and traditional systems of governance. African societies, which had their own complex and diverse systems of governance, were suddenly subjected to foreign rule and new administrative divisions. The goal was clear: to extract resources for European industries and markets. Colonizers exploited Africa's rich natural resources, from minerals and metals to agricultural products, to fuel their own industrial revolutions and economic growth. African economies were forcibly integrated into a global system designed to benefit the colonizers. Ports and infrastructure were developed primarily to facilitate the export of raw materials, while local industries were neglected or suppressed. Cash crops like cotton, coffee, and rubber were prioritized over food production, leading to monoculture economies that were vulnerable to market fluctuations and environmental changes, making African nations reliant on imports. This dependency created a cycle of economic vulnerability, where African countries had to import essential goods, often at high costs, while exporting raw materials at lower prices. This dependence on external markets continues to this day. Despite gaining political independence, many African nations still grapple with the economic legacies of colonialism, striving to diversify their economies and reduce reliance on foreign imports. The mid-20th century saw a wave of independence sweep across Africa. Countries that had long been under colonial rule finally broke free, igniting a sense of hope and possibility. The streets were filled with jubilant celebrations, as people envisioned a future where they could determine their own destinies. However, the newly independent nations inherited economies designed for extraction, not sustainable growth. The colonial powers had established systems that prioritized the removal of valuable resources like minerals and agricultural products, leaving behind economies that were heavily dependent on these exports. This focus on extraction created a fragile economic foundation. Infrastructure, built to facilitate the flow of resources out of Africa, remained inadequate for local needs. Railways and roads were constructed to connect mines and plantations to ports, rather than to support internal trade and development. This meant that many regions within these countries were left isolated and underdeveloped, hindering their ability to grow and prosper. The education systems designed to produce a workforce subservient to colonial needs often failed to equip Africans with the skills needed for economic development. Schools focused on basic literacy and vocational training rather than fostering critical thinking and innovation. As a result, many young Africans found themselves ill-prepared to take on leadership roles or to drive economic progress in their newly independent nations. This legacy of colonialism continues to cast a long shadow over the continent's economic landscape. The challenges faced by modern African economies are deeply rooted in these inherited structures of imbalance. Despite the passage of time, the effects of these colonial policies are still felt today, as nations strive to build more resilient and diversified economies. The journey towards true economic independence is ongoing, requiring both reflection on the past and innovative strategies for the future. Today, many African nations remain trapped in a cycle of exporting raw materials. They sell their resources, oil, minerals, timber, at low prices to developed nations. These resources are then transformed into finished goods and sold back to African markets at much higher prices. This dependency on commodity exports makes African economies vulnerable to price fluctuations in global markets. When prices fall, as they often do, it directly impacts the income of farmers, miners, and entire nations. Section 5. The Weight of Debt, a Legacy of Structural Adjustment. In the 1980s, many African nations faced severe economic crises. International financial institutions like the World Bank and IMF offered loans, but with strings attached. These loans came with conditions known as structural adjustment programs. These programs often required governments to cut spending on essential services like healthcare and education. While intended to promote economic liberalization, these measures often exacerbated poverty and inequality, further hindering development. Section 6. Urban Dreams, Rural Realities, the Two Faces of African Economies. The face of Africa is changing rapidly. Cities are booming, attracting investment and offering opportunities. Yet this urban growth often masks the reality of rural Africa, where the majority of the population still resides. The gap between urban and rural areas is widening. Rural communities often lack access to basic infrastructure, healthcare, and education. This disparity fuels poverty, unemployment, and social unrest. Section 7. Beyond Statistics, the Human Cost of Economic Struggle. The economic struggles of Africa are not just abstract figures. They represent real lives and shattered dreams. They are reflected in the faces of farmers struggling to feed their families, children denied access to education, and mothers dying in childbirth due to inadequate health care. The true cost of these struggles is measured in lost potential, in missed opportunities, and in the erosion of human dignity. Section 8. Breaking the Chains Towards a Future of Shared Prosperity. Despite the challenges, there is hope. Across Africa, a new generation is rising, innovative, entrepreneurial, and determined to rewrite the narrative. By investing in education, promoting good governance, and fostering fair trade practices, Africa can break free from the cycle of poverty and dependency. Section 9. A Call to Action, Rethinking Development, Empowering Africa. The time for change is now. We must move beyond the traditional models of aid and development. Africa needs genuine partnerships that empower its people and allow them to chart their own course to prosperity. Let us work together to create a future where Africa's vast potential is fully realized and its people can finally claim their rightful place on the global stage. Africa, a continent bursting with potential. A land of vast landscapes, rich cultures, and incredible diversity. Abundant natural resources. A young, vibrant population. Cities bustling with energy and innovation. Yet it remains the poorest continent on Earth. How can this be? Why does such potential coexist with such poverty? The answer is complex. It's a story of exploitation, unfair policies, and internal struggles, a history marred by colonization and conflict. But it's also a story of resilience, innovation, and hope. Communities coming together to create change. We've all heard the narrative. Africa is riddled with corruption, poverty, and war, a continent in perpetual crisis. While these issues exist, they don't paint the full picture. There is more to Africa than its struggles. This simplistic view ignores the external forces that have kept Africa down for centuries, forces that continue to impact its progress. It's time to dig deeper, to understand the real story of Africa's economic struggles, to see beyond the headlines. This isn't about pity, it's about understanding the truth. It's about seeing Africa for what it truly is. It's about recognizing the systemic barriers that prevent Africa from achieving its full potential, barriers that can be overcome. It's about time we acknowledge the role the rest of the world has played in creating this situation, and take responsibility. Let's be clear, Africa's destiny is not predetermined, its future is in its own hands. This is a continent on the cusp of greatness, a place where dreams are being realized. But to get there, we need to confront the hard truths, challenge the status quo, and rewrite the narrative. Together, we can change the story. Imagine a game where the rules are constantly changing, always in favor of one player. No matter how hard the other players try, they can never catch up. That's what it's like for African nations in the global economy. They are constantly at a disadvantage, struggling to keep up with ever-changing rules. The powerful nations set the rules, they control the institutions and make decisions that benefit themselves. And guess who benefits? Spoiler alert, it's not Africa. The people who suffer the most are those who have the least power. Take trade, for example. Developed countries preach free trade while subsidizing their own farmers, creating an uneven playing field. This makes it impossible for African farmers to compete. They're forced to sell their products at lower prices, undermining their livelihoods and economic stability. Then there's the issue of debt. Many African countries are drowning in debt, thanks to predatory loans with sky-high interest rates that are nearly impossible to repay. They end up spending more on debt repayment than on vital services like healthcare and education, which are crucial for development. The global financial system is like a rigged casino. The house always wins, and in this case, the house is made up of wealthy nations and powerful corporations that hold all the cards. It's time to change the rules of the game and create a level playing field. Only then can we ensure fair opportunities for everyone, including Africa. In the 1980s, a new economic gospel swept across the globe. Neoliberalism, privatization, deregulation, and free markets were the supposed miracle cures for struggling economies. African nations were pressured to adopt these policies in exchange for aid and loans. But this experiment backfired spectacularly. Privatization led to job losses and higher prices for essential services. Deregulation opened the door to exploitation by foreign companies. The gap between the rich and the poor widened. Neoliberalism promised prosperity but delivered pain. It weakened African governments, eroded public services, and left millions more in poverty. It's clear that this top-down approach imposed from outside has failed Africa. Now let's be real, corruption is a significant and pervasive problem in Africa. It's a cancer that eats away at trust, hinders development, and robs citizens of their future. The impact is felt in every corner of society, from the poorest neighborhoods to the highest offices. From petty bribes to grand theft by those in power, corruption exists at all levels of society. It's a systemic issue that requires systemic solutions. But focusing solely on internal corruption ignores the external factors that enable it. International actors often play a significant role in perpetuating these issues. Remember those predatory loans we talked about? They are a key part of the problem. Corrupt officials often pocket the money, leaving their countries deeper in debt. This cycle of debt and corruption is hard to break. And who do you think benefits from the lack of transparency and resource extraction deals? It's certainly not the local communities, it's not the African people. They are often left with environmental degradation and little to no economic benefit. It's often foreign companies who exploit weak governance for their own gain. They profit while the local population suffers. Fighting corruption requires a multi-pronged approach. It's not just about catching the corrupt, but also about creating systems that prevent corruption. It's about strengthening institutions, promoting transparency, and empowering citizens to hold their leaders accountable. Education and awareness are key, but it's also about addressing the external actors who perpetuate and benefit from corruption. Only then can we hope to see real change. Section 5. Political instability, a recipe for economic disaster. Imagine trying to build a house in the middle of a hurricane. That's what it's like trying to foster economic growth in politically unstable environments. Conflict, violence, and political turmoil create uncertainty, deter investment, and disrupt essential services. From civil wars to military coups, political instability has plagued many African nations. This instability often stems from historical factors like colonialism, ethnic tensions, and competition for resources. Political instability creates a vicious cycle. It leads to poverty, which in turn fuels further instability. Breaking this cycle requires addressing the root causes of conflict, promoting good governance, and fostering inclusive political systems. Section 6. Climate change. The unfair burden on Africa's farmers. Africa contributes the least to global greenhouse gas emissions. Yet it's on the front lines of climate change. Rising temperatures, droughts, and floods are wreaking havoc on agriculture, the backbone of many African economies. Imagine working tirelessly to grow crops, only to see them wither and die because of unpredictable weather patterns. That's the reality for millions of African farmers. Climate change is threatening their livelihoods, exacerbating food insecurity, and pushing more people into poverty. Developed nations have a moral obligation to support Africa in adapting to climate change. This means providing financial assistance, technology transfer, and capacity building. It's about acknowledging the unfair burden placed on Africa and working together to find solutions. Section 7. The long shadow of colonialism, a past that still haunts. We can't talk about Africa's economic struggles without addressing the elephant in the room: colonialism. For centuries, European powers carved up Africa, exploiting its resources and decimating its people. The legacy of colonialism continues to cast a long shadow. Artificial borders drawn by colonizers created ethnic tensions. Extractive economic systems designed to benefit the colonial powers left many African nations dependent on exporting raw materials. Neocolonial practices, where former colonial powers maintain economic and political control, continue to this day. It's time to acknowledge the lasting damage of colonialism and work towards reparations and a more just global order. Section 8. Seeds of Hope. African solutions for African problems. Despite the challenges, a spirit of innovation and resilience thrives in Africa. Across the continent, local entrepreneurs are developing homegrown solutions to local problems. From mobile banking to renewable energy, Africans are taking charge of their own destiny. Take, for example, the young entrepreneurs in Kenya who developed mobile money transfer systems that have revolutionized banking in Africa. Or the women in Burkina Faso who are using solar energy to power their homes and businesses. These grassroots initiatives are not just about economic empowerment. They're about dignity, self-reliance, and taking control of one's own future. They represent the ingenuity and determination of a continent ready to rise. Section 9. A New Dawn for Africa. Time to rewrite the narrative. The narrative of Africa as a continent defined by poverty and despair is outdated and inaccurate. It's time for a new narrative, one that acknowledges the challenges but also celebrates the resilience, innovation, and potential of Africa and its people. This requires a fundamental shift in how the world interacts with Africa. It's about moving beyond aid and towards genuine partnership. It's about creating a more just and equitable global system where African nations have a seat at the table and a voice in shaping their own destiny. The path ahead won't be easy, but with determination, solidarity, and a commitment to justice, Africa can overcome its challenges and achieve sustainable growth and economic liberation. The time for change is now. Let's rewrite the narrative together.